All right, welcome back to the program, 1010 at WGMD. This is Jared on the Talk of Delmarva. Talk radio for the rest of us, and it's good to be with you guys this morning. Listen, it's my honor and privilege to announce the next guest and bring the next guest that I have onto the air with me. And I got to tell you, I'm just as surprised as anybody that this next guest is coming on, because I tell you what, up until last week, even though I've studied some of her work, I had no idea that I would ever get to talk to her, and I very rarely am impressed and excited enough to do an interview that I'm just jazzed about. But I've got one right now for you, and I'd like to welcome onto the radio Druyan, who is she's in her own right a very talented individual. An author, a producer, the wife of the great Dr. Carl Sagan, and right now working with podjockey.com for the fabulous podcast that's called At Home in the Cosmos with Annie Druyan. And I'll tell you what, I've checked out some of it already. It's about 3.5 hours long, so I haven't seen it all, but I've checked out some of it already, and it's fantastic. I'd like to welcome Ann onto the radio. Good morning, Ann. Are you with me? Hello.
I'm with you, Jared, and I'm equally excited to be with you today. Thanks for having me on.
Well, listen, I want to first start off by talking about the song that I just played. Were you aware that this is going on? This, I'd say it's sort of a resurgence in the interest of Carl Sagan right now. And all these videos on YouTube are being posted, and that was a song that was released on Third Man Records, I think.
That's right, Jack White, the great Jack White of the White Stripes and the Rock on Tours. He discovered it online, just as I did. I first found it when I guess maybe there had been 4,000 or 5,000 visitors.
Yeah.
And I was so glad that instead of writing some grumpy letter to John Boswell, the guy who created it, and saying, you're infringing my copyright on Cosmos or something,
yeah,
I wrote him this fan letter saying, this is so inspiring. It's kind of like a hymn to reality. And he and Jack White and I got together and we released the song.
I was wondering how that happened, because I got to tell you, about a week and a half ago, I ordered the record. Actually, it's a 7-inch record from Third Man Records.
It's a thing of beauty, yeah.
Yeah, it is. The back of the record. Now, what's the back of the record? It's the Voyager message, I think, on the back of the record?
Actually, yeah, it's the scientific hieroglyphics that Carl and the great Frank Drake designed for the cover of the Voyager record, and it's on board both Voyager spacecraft. And these are scientific hieroglyphics, essentially instructions on how to play the record for extraterrestrials of perhaps 1,000 million years from now.
Wow, hurtling through space right now.
Right.
All right. Well, listen, I guess we should start off by maybe doing a proper introduction of you. Well, I'll tell you what. Cosmos. Okay, I'm going to start off by talking about Cosmos. Cosmos has received a renewed interest, I think,
yes.
Partly because of the inclusion on iTunes. That's where I found it anyway.
Well, actually, I think it's the other way around.
Oh,
I think it's on iTunes because of a kind of worldwide resurgence of interest in Cosmos. Because, and I say this immodestly because as one of the two co-writers with Carl Sagan, I feel that Cosmos occupies a kind of ecological niche that is completely otherwise untenanted. This Cosmos is about the soaring spiritual uplift of the revelations of science, and the feelings and the excitement and the joy of discovery and wonder. And I can't think of another show that's specifically just about those great things.
A personal confession of mine. I actually have several. I've bought all the episodes, and I have several episodes. I was too young when it came out. I'm only 31 right now, so I was. Yeah, I know. I was too young when it came out, and I don't know what made me find it. I guess about a year ago, maybe less, or maybe more. I found it, and I started downloading it, and I've always been familiar with Contact, of course,
Mm-hmm.
I've read the book Contact, and I've heard people speak great things about the work about Carl Sagan. But I it's just one of those things that even though I've always been interested in science, I never explored more as far as his work goes. And I found it on iTunes, and to this day I carry at least 2 or 3 episodes with me on my iPod at all times. When I'm in a rotten mood, this is just, for me, it's the most uplifting thing I can put on to just make everything, I don't know, make more sense, I think.
I'm so thrilled to hear you say that. That was our objective all those 30 years ago when we began to work on it. And you are the fulfillment of our fondest dreams for this series. So thank you so much.
Well, did you think it would live on this long, though? Did you think that, I'm speaking of Cosmos in general, in particular right now, but just in general, the work, did you think that your and his work would live on to this day in the way that it has?
Well, we hoped it would, and we did have a sense of it was a kind of a sacred undertaking. But recall that this was after we had created the Voyager interstellar message. And because those golden phonograph records with the sounds of the Earth and the music of Earth and the 118 pictures of life on Earth and the brain waves of a woman newly fallen in love and a mother's first kiss and first words to her newborn baby. There was so much in that, and we knew that has a shelf life of 1,000 million years. And those Voyagers are the first two objects ever to have left the solar system. And so they have Chuck Berry and Blind Willie Johnson and Beethoven and Bach on them. And knowing that they would last 1,000 million years, I think set us up for the Cosmos Project to say, let's do something that will touch people for generations to come. And I am so thrilled. I wish Carl could know how influential and what an enduring power to inspire Cosmos has.
Do you think that we're in a new, how do I say this? A new, I've been using the word resurgency, but a new age of human understanding as far as this stuff is concerned?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's only 400 years since Galileo's first look through a telescope. What's 400 years? That's nothing in the 13.5 billion years of cosmic evolution. So, we are living at a moment that is unprecedented in human history. The number of scientific revelations come in so fast that people can't even absorb all the input because we're finding out so much about our universe at such a rate. We've discovered 400 new worlds that circle other suns in just the past few years. It's not even a headline because it's such an astonishing amount of new information.
For you, Ann, what's the most shocking, based on what we've been talking about, what's the most shocking and exciting scientific find of the last couple of years in your eyes? What's the thing that you've seen that says, why isn't everybody talking about this?
Oh, that's a really, God, that's an overwhelming question. Well, one thing I'd like to say is, a couple of years ago, Cassini took its first close-up pictures of the surface of Titan, a moon of Saturn that Carl had been interested in for decades. And what we saw there was not, the desert landscape of Mars, but a kind of topography which was exotic and yet in some way very familiar, with cliffs and, just a magnificent landscape. And I thought to myself, why isn't that a more famous picture? And also, why aren't we doing everything we can to get there and to see what's up close, what's really there?
You're right. We're living in a time right now where travel to other planets, it's not only a possibility, it's been talked about in presidential circles, but every time they talk about it, and I don't know about you, but I'm disappointed to find out that it's never coming to fruition. What's it going to take?
I don't know, but I have taken matters into my own hands with the Planetary Society of Pasadena, California, planetary.org, and we are mounting our own actual solar sail space program, privately funded. We've raised the money to do it, and we are working on the kinds of sailing spacecraft that will take huge reflective sails, catch little bits of sunlight, and be pushed ever faster, so that instead of going 38,000 miles an hour as the Voyagers do, our solar sail spacecraft, or light sails, will be able to travel up to 1/2 the speed of light.
Wow!
In future generations. So I don't know what I love NASA. I admire NASA. I think NASA has done a phenomenal job. But, it needs the leadership to completely articulate what the mission should be. And I feel that, we're like the toddler who runs away from its mother's skirts, a few feet and dashes back to hide there. And that's what we are. We went to the moon. We've gone to these other planets with our robots. And now we've had a little bit of a failure of nerve.
Well, you know what, though? Hearing you talk about it, that's no surprise. We sort of do that in our own daily lives, too, with risks and things we want to do. We take a little step, we put our toe in the water, and then we decide, not for me, not today, another day.
That's right.
Tell me about the Planetary Society. I'm on the website right now, planetary.org.
Planetary.org. It's the largest space interest group on Earth. It's a grassroots organization. And for 10 years, it was co-founded by Carl Sagan and two other gentlemen 30 years ago. And for the last 10 years, we have been working on these space missions together. And we actually launched a spacecraft from a Russian intercontinental ballistic missile stationed in the Barents Sea in 2005. We had this suborbital launch failure. But now we're moving on, and we think we may launch in the future, possibly with a NASA launch, we're hoping.
Any idea when a time frame for that?
Probably about a year from now.
Oh, really? That's exciting. That's pretty exciting. So planetary.org is the website for that. I also want to talk about the other project that you're involved in right now, and I know there's a million projects you're involved in, but the podcast, how I came about this, I saw it in Talkers Magazine, podjockey.com, At Home in the Cosmos with Annie Druyan and Michael Harrison. Tell me about how this all came together. How'd you get hooked up with Michael Harrison at Talkers Magazine?
Actually did an interview just like the one we're doing right now a couple of years ago, and we spoke offline, and he sent me some issues of Talkers so I could get to know a little bit about what he does. And he had this brilliant idea, which was to create a prime podcast, a podcast with great production values, which would be coming into my home in upstate New York, the one that Carl built, and seeing, the things that were most precious to us, and giving me the chance to tell 39 stories, 39 separate tracks on the album of what it was like to live and work with Carl Sagan for 20 years, and some of the more amazing stories of our work and our lives together.
Were any of these, delving so much into your personal life, were any of these particularly difficult for you to talk to a camera about?
Well, once you get rolling, you sort of forget what I felt like I was talking to Michael Harrison because he was directing it, and so I was just sort of looking at him. But the other thing is that I just feel this tremendous pride that the signal honor of my whole life is that I spent 20 years with Carl Sagan. And I think of him, not in a supernatural sense, because he was a completely human being, but as a prophet in so many different areas. And so there was a fantastic love story to tell. And I kind of wanted to bear witness because I'm really proud of my time with Carl, of Contact and Cosmos and the books we wrote together and the Voyager record. These are amazing things, and I guess I wanted for a historical document to be able to tell these stories, but also to tell other people, just because, as Carl used to say, when you're in love, you want to tell the world, and that's how he felt about science and our family, and that's how I certainly feel about my time with him.
It's amazing. And speaking of the podcast, there's something that Harrison said at the beginning of the podcast, on the trailer that I'd like to kind of, I guess, echo, where he says that. Let me see if I can play it real quick. Hold on.
Histories growing up in Brooklyn and Queens. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to sit across the table from some personality or some figure that you admired from afar, that you followed their work, that you consumed their products, and you want more, but there is no more? You can't get it on radio or television because everything is just basically the surface of what's a very deep subject. I felt that way about Carl Sagan.
It's amazing to hear Harrison say that, because I got to tell you, I felt the exact same way when I heard about this. And this project that you've done, the At Home in the Cosmos on podjockey.com, this is that. It's an in-depth look at, well, it even says on the paper here, in-depth look at the life, love, and the work of Carl Sagan and Druyan. It's like a dream come true for people who are interested in not just the scientific subject matter, which, Annie, there is a ton of that out if you want to look at all the books and you want to,
right.
You can get into that. But as far as what the man was like and what your life with him was like, there's not a heck of a lot out there about that.
No, Sagan, thank you so much for all of these kind words. I really appreciate it. Yeah, and the thing about Carl, is that he was that perfect blending of feeling and intelligence, of skepticism and wonder. And so, to talk about him and to talk about the things we did together, it's just a way of talking. It is another way of talking about the subjects that fascinate us most. How the universe came to be, who we are, and so I'm very pleased with the outcome, very proud of it, and would love to share it with as many people as possible.
It's 10:26 at WGMD. I've got some people calling in, but I don't know. I've got so many questions for you. I'll try to take one call, see what this guy has to say, and then I've got a ton more for you.
I've got some people calling in, but
okay, he's listening on delay, so I got to let him go. All right. Anyway, if you guys want to check out the podcast, go to podjockey.com. Again, the Cosmos. You can check out the whole series of Cosmos. It's available on iTunes. Can I go back to Cosmos for a second and ask you about some of the how involved were you? I know that you're listed in the credits a lot in Cosmos. How involved were you in not only the original project but the re-release of it? I mean, you do video introductions at the beginning and all of that.
Yes, yeah. Well, from day one, I was involved, and I was the co-writer with Dr. Stephen Soter, brilliant astronomer who I still work with, and so it was the three of us. A lot of Cosmos was Carl's, the ideas that thrilled Carl most over the period of time that he was evolving before we got to do the show. But there were many parts of it, many elements of it, which are much beloved, which are the result of the three of us hanging out together for, day and night for 3 years, and really just giving our entire lives over to the project, going to 40 locations around the world. And people will be surprised to learn that so much of Cosmos was actually written in the trailer before Carl was about to go on set.
Wow.
To kind of, but it was just a feast of ideas, of excitement. And I think it conveys that ethos of the kind of, accepting the fact that we are tiny in a universe that's just vast beyond our wildest ability to reckon. Accepting that is very hard, but once you embrace that you're not the center of the universe and that we are a tiny part of the fabric of the universe, we can feel some self-esteem by the courage of the questions that we ask and the very fact that we take this truth within to our hearts. Cosmos is about taking the revelations of the modern scientific revolution to heart, not just knowing them intellectually, but seeing how we are changed by them. And I don't think there was anyone. I know I'm biased. I don't think there's ever been a greater teacher than Carl Sagan, because he was never trying to show people how much he knew. He always wanted to connect, and that was one of the magnificent things about him.
What was it like that? I don't know how. I don't want to get too personal with you, but was it like that at home too?
Yeah,
it was.
Oh yeah, I'm sitting in the very house that we feature in the podcast right now, and remembering that there was no borderline between work and love and fun. Carl would he didn't write. He didn't use a computer, and he didn't write longhand. But he would walk around with these dictation machines. And any hour of the night or day, we would have an idea. He would have an idea. I would have an idea. And we would go to work. And, it was actually the kind of work we did together was one of the many different ways that we made love with each other. It was the thrill of exchanging or having a great idea. When I could get that look in Carl's eye by having some new original idea, that was just a kind of a thrill for me, and and he certainly amazed me virtually daily. We asked each other to marry each other every single day of our lives together, and we were keenly and aware of how brief life is.
I tell you, speaking of which, I've about the home life and all of that. One of the places I check out frequently, carlsagan.com, the Carl Sagan portal online, and I don't know if it was last Christmas season, you had a story on there about a little bit about the home life, and I tell you, it was touching and beautiful and sad to read, and there's a lot of that kind of stuff in the podcast that you've done now too.
Yeah, I was very proud. Our two families, very, very close. And so our children, our parents lived with us. My dad lives across the street to this day. We had this amazingly full and beautifully realized life. And it's the kind of thing you want to share because it was so, it was an example, an existence theorem, as we say in math, of what's possible. And that's kind of the joy I had in doing the podcast, where, these are 39 stories, and each story is an aspect of that joy of having a complete life with someone in the context of a family that's so close. It really, I was lucky, really lucky.
Listen, it's 10:32. I've got to take a break. We've got the weather coming up, and we have you're sticking around with me till 11 o'clock today, right?
That would be my pleasure.
Okay, I've got Druyan, who's taken part in this At Home in the Cosmos podcast, available on podjockey.com with Talkers Magazine, Michael Harrison, an in-depth personal look at the life, love, and work of Carl Sagan and Druyan. And, we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. I want everyone to go online and check it out. It's a premium podcast. There are all these high-definition video podcasts on there. It's like 3.5 hours worth, and it's totally worth the watch if you're at all interested in the subject matter. Otherwise, if you're new to the subject matter, I recommend, amongst other things, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but I recommend completely the Cosmos series. I'll tell you what, it'll open your eyes. I've watched it with people who've had almost no background in science whatsoever, and it will open your eyes, and it will give you... Well, what it did for me, it'll give you an excitement about science, and it'll give you an excitement about life and your place in the universe. And also, Pale Blue Dot's another good one. It's 10:33. We'll be back. AccuWeather, Marine Weather, Fox News. Stay tuned. This is Jared Morris on WGMD.
You're listening to Jared Morris. Call Jared now at 945-9292. Toll free in Maryland. 1-800-518-9292. Or free on the Verizon Wireless Network. Pound 927 on your cell phones.
All right, 10:38 at WGMD. This is Gerald on Talk of Delmarva. Good to be with you guys today, and it's a special Saturday morning for me as I have on the line a very special guest, Druyan, one of the brilliant minds behind the Cosmos series, this new podcast on podjockey.com, and the wife of the great Dr. Carl Sagan. And I'll tell you what, I've got a caller on the line right now, Ann, that has a question for you. Don't know what it's going to be, but we'll take the calls. 945-9292. Good morning, Frank. You're on the air. What's up?
Good morning, Miss. Is it Dreas?
Druyan.
Yes, hi.
Druyan, I'm sorry.
Druyan.
Jared had his earlier guest, and Jared, I compliment you for the diversity of your show. His earlier guest was a Presbyterian pastor. So you've used words in your discussion such as spiritual, sacred, and you described Dr. Sagan as a prophet. I wonder, do you think that your work and Dr. Sagan's work disproves the existence of God, or as we dissect the cosmos to its smallest parts, does it become harder to explain in a scientific fashion, and it actually begins to prove the existence of intelligent design? And I'll listen off the air. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you for the call. And yeah, I have a follow-up of that as well. Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
Well, listen, I want to thank Frank for a very, probably the deepest question of all. And from my point of view, I feel that I just don't know.
Yeah.
I reserve judgment because I realize that our understanding of the cosmos is so completely limited at this point. that all we know is that it's way, way much bigger than we ever dreamed. Remember, we can only even perceive some 6% of the entire cosmos because it's enshrouded in dark matter. So when we're looking at those 400 billion suns in our galaxy alone, and then thinking that there are hundreds of billions of galaxies, each with their own hundreds of billions of stars, and that's just 6% of what's out there, I think we have to conclude abject humility and say that we do not know how this great cosmos came to be. I don't see a single bit of evidence personally for intelligent design, but I also, cannot understand how people can make flat statements about whether or not there is or is not a God. I just think, for me, as for Einstein and Carl and many others, the laws of the universe, the laws of physics that we're beginning to understand, are, for me, an expression of something of a grandeur and sacred, mysterious beauty. And so I revere it, and I just feel, as Carl said, that recognizing the tininess of our planet in the context, our real circumstances in the universe, the tininess of that pale blue dot in the context of the universe, can only make us conclude that we have to be much kinder to each other and take much better care of each other, because there's so few of us and we're surrounded by a cosmos of such vastness.
Well,
so, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, you mentioned pale blue dot, and there's a lot of that, of what that book is about, or what I got out of it was the very same thing, that just throughout time, throughout the ages, man has perceived himself as the center of the universe, and then he got moved off a little bit, but he's still the center of this, and the center of that, and the center of this. But the more that we see, the more that we explore, the more that we find that we're such a smaller part of such a vast thing, that it's humbling, but it's also, I mean, it's a beautiful thing as well, because it makes us see how much there is out there.
And also, we can be so proud that beings as tiny as we are have begun to really face the truth of it. I mean, what is growing up and becoming an adult but realizing that you're not the center of the universe and that the universe was not made for you? That's coming of age. And our civilization, when you asked earlier, Jared, is this a special moment? Yes, it's the moment of our coming of age in the Milky Way galaxy, of our realizing that we are so small, and yet being able to admit this to ourselves is a sign of maturity and mental health.
I'm glad that the last caller called, because I tell you what, in reading the book Contact, something that was kind of missing in the movie was this concept at the end of the book about the artist's signature, and I mean, there have been authors, people like I think Richard Dawkins and other people who have used Carl's work and his words and your work and your words as kind of proof that, well, there's no God. But I've never seen that in any of your guys' work.
No, that's not what we were about. First of all, astronomy particularly, but science generally, is a lesson in humility. It's not, and that's why it's so tragic when you see people pontificate, and act superior and act like they know it all because they know a little science, the little science that we as a species know. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous point of view. No, what we're saying is that what we're finding out here, yes, is you could say it's a kind of we're being demoted because we're not at the center as our ancestors like to believe.
Right.
But in another way, it's revealing that we are part of a legacy, a continuity of 4 billion years on this planet of local evolution and 13.5 billion years of cosmic evolution. As Carl said so magnificently, we are star stuff. Our bones, our teeth, our hair, every part of our physical being was made in the fiery explosions of distant stars. That's not a fairy tale. That is physical reality. And I wish we could embrace the reality instead of trying to make up stories to make ourselves feel special.
It's interesting you mentioned that the people who know a little bit about science who then have this ego about it, and it's the same thing with religious fundamentalism as well. I wish the people who were religious, that people who studied the Bible and believed in God and were Christians and whatever else, I wish that they would approach the subject matter with the same kind of wonderment that Carl and yourself and people, other people approach this. Stuff.
Thank you so much, Jared. Part of this podcast at podjockey.com is a tour of our home, and one of the things that you see in the podcast is the quote from Voltaire that Carl commissioned to be created as a piece of art, which was Voltaire imagining that all the religions of the 100 billion stars. He had he was an 18th century man, but he had a very sophisticated idea of the size of the universe, that all the religions of all those places with their special rituals were meeting at the center of the galaxy.
Yeah.
And finally, the actual creator said, forget about your rituals and telling people who to love and who to be with and what to eat. We judge you by your actions, by how you treat each other. And I think that's the only way that anyone should be judged. Do you feed someone else? Do you care about them? Do you try to comfort them? These are the big questions. And that's how I judge all people who claim to be scientists or religious or anything else.
Can I ask you one more? And this is a personal question in a way, but it's also a spiritual question. Can I ask you one more question related to that? Okay. I was watching, a little while ago on YouTube, there was an old interview with Carl Sagan, and I think it was maybe on Charlie Rose, and this was around in the mid-'90s this interview had taken place, okay? Yes. And towards the end, a lot of this was, I think it was around the same time that Science is a Candle in the Dark came out, and so a lot of it was focused upon religion versus science, and you know how news makes that debate, right? So one of the questions, one of the subjects that came up with Charlie Rose was, well, do you believe in life after death? Do you not? Right. And he began talking about his mother that had just passed, and said that, well, I'd love to believe that there's something out there, but he's got no real proof that, although he thought he heard her voice at one point. But has anything like that ever happened to you?
With Carl?
Yeah.
No. Nothing at all. In fact, I think part of the beauty of our lives together was that we lived knowing that we had a finite period of time to be together, and it gave us such a sense of meaning. It gave us such an urgent sense of being here now, which I think is the biggest challenge of life. And so, no, I have never felt that. Carl talks in my head incessantly, because when you spend 20 years with someone, you're hearing them. And I always, I feel like people, things happen, discoveries are made, and I do feel I know how Carl would react, knowing him so well.
Yeah.
But no, I feel tragically, but certainly, that when Carl died, that was the end of our communication.
Was he a big talker in life? Did he talk all the time?
We talked incessantly. We love to talk. Nobody ever says shut up in my family. It's a big, everybody. We had, when Carl was alive, his son, Jeremy, was in college at Cornell. And my two children, our son together was 2, and our daughter was a young teenager. My parents lived across the street. So every single night, we would have these fantastic dinners in my house where we'd be arguing and talking and laughing and joking. And it was wonderful. He was the most communicative person that I've ever met, and the most fully realized in terms of his ability to live, be alive. The greatest laugh I've ever heard in my life. It's on the Voyager record, I'm happy to say.
Really?
And it's the laugh of a truly free, healthy, beautiful man.
That's a lot of the work, too. You're right. A lot of the work is really about embracing the beauty of the life that we have.
That's it.
I want to ask you about another book. I'm currently reading Shadows of Our Forgotten Ancestors.
I'm so thrilled. That was his favorite book that we ever wrote.
That's what I wanted to ask you. You co-wrote that with him, and I read somewhere, it might have been in the Varieties of Our Scientific Experience, I think you said that was his favorite book, so that's why I picked it up. Why was it his favorite?
Because we attempted, this was during the worst days of the nuclear arms race, and Carl was deeply involved in campaigning against the nuclear arms race, and of course did original research on nuclear winter and inadvertent climate change, global warming, all of these things.
Right.
And so we began the work with a kind of profoundly depressed sense that our species there was just something wrong with it, because we seemed to keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And we wanted to better understand what was wrong with us. And by the time we finished writing it, we felt extremely optimistic about the human species and about the future, and about the fact that, we do carry some evolutionary baggage. We are primates, there's no question about that. But that we had a lot of hope, because, we have a long childhood as a species. It's one of our distinctions. And we take care of our young for such a long period of time that there's certain mechanisms built into us, wired up into us, of altruism and patience and understanding. And so, as you'll see in the book, we found a lot of research which gave us a lot of hope that we'll find our way home as a species someday. I don't think that the problems that we face now are intractable and that they'll never be solved. I think that there's a lot of reason to hope, but also a lot of work to do.
One of the amazing things about that book, and it's actually touched upon in Cosmos as well. Listen, I took some science classes in high school and a few in college, and I studied communication, so a lot of the stuff I didn't delve that deep into.
Yeah.
But when you talk about how the enzymes work together and how everything has to be just right inside God, that's amazing.
Yes, just to be alive, just the fact that you and I, that we are talking to each other at this moment. One moment in the 13.5 billion years of cosmic time, and think of how, just to be alive, how amazing that is. Think of how many sperm there are in a single male ejaculation. Think of, how many little things, like my parents met, as one of the stories I tell on the podcast, my parents met on a subway train, a New York subway train in rush hour. And I always think back as to, what if my mother had stopped to look in a store window and missed the train? What if my father had done an errand? Instead of that,
right,
of meeting each other, and then all of the other possibilities that could have meant that I would never exist at all. So there's a sense in which once you start thinking about the causality, skeins of that lead to even existing, you have to be suffused with a sense of wonder. I'm conscious. I'm alive in the cosmos at this moment, right now. It's an amazing thing.
We're almost out of time here. I've got two questions for you.
Please.
And then I want to, talk about the podcast really quickly. Okay. Oh, this is a personal one for me. Okay. I love reading the books that you guys did. I love the Contact, the movie. However, the thing that keeps getting me, and you mentioned how Carl was a teacher. It's the way, his delivery, his voice, the excitement in it. That's what makes Cosmos so special to me. And actually, I bought the audiobook of Pale Blue Dot just so I could hear him read the first couple chapters of that.
Yes.
And you mentioned that he would carry around a dictation machine and all.
Yes.
Is there any more audio? Is there any more of him teaching?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Yeah, in fact, we are at carlsagan.com. We're working on a project because Carl gave some of the most remarkable, breathtaking lectures that you've ever heard, the kinds of lectures where, it's over before you even realize it.
Right.
Because the excitement is not, there's not a boring moment in them. And so we have taken them. We're now taking all of these cassette and reel-to-reel tapes and digitizing them, and we hope to put them out on carlsagan.com in the very near future, because we'd like to make these amazing talks. I think I must have, I traveled with Carl virtually everywhere he went for 20 years, and I went to all those talks. And I have to say that They were for me a religious experience, and so I'm going to do everything I can to make them available to as many people as possible.
I am so glad to hear that. That's a good day for me. Listen, I've got so much more for you. I could have spent another hour with you, but we're out of time. I want to talk to you about podjockey.com. This is how it works. You go to podjockey.com. It's about 3.5 hours of high definition video footage taken in your home in Ithaca, New York, and yours and Carl's home, the home that he built. And it's high definition video. It's $14.95 for a subscription to it, but it's worth every single penny of it. And I've been talking about it on the radio time and time again. After 11 o'clock, I'll play the trailer again so everybody can hear it. But it's real easy to sign up. Just go to podjockey.com and you fill out the information and you can get a copy of that. On the Carl Sagan portal, carlsagan.com, at the very end of his bio, it's written here that he recorded a message. There's an audio message here with a waterfall cascading in the background.
Yes.
Can you tell me what that's all about? I want to end our interview with playing that.
Okay, well, Carl, this was some years before he became ill, actually, and he was asked by the Planetary Society, because we at the Planetary Society like to send things on the various probes that are launched, and so this was they asked him, would you record something for the future citizens, the future, hopefully, human citizens of the planet Mars for sometime in the distant future? And Carl sat by the waterfall, which I'm looking at right now at our beautiful home in upstate New York, and he recorded this message to the future, to the human settlers of the planet Mars.
And I'm going to play it when we get out of here. And listen, I just want to thank you for your time today. It's been so far one of the just joys of my career here to talk to you. Thank you so much.
I can't tell you when I've never enjoyed an interview more. And Jared, I really hope to make your acquaintance. Wow, thank you for these brilliant questions.
Well,
and for such great kindness.
Hopefully we can stay in touch, and when something, when you have something to promote or something big happens, they find more water on the moon, we'll talk again, okay?
I look forward to that time.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It's 10:57. This is WGMD.
Hi, I'm Carl Sagan. This is a place where I often work in Ithaca, New York, near Cornell University. Maybe you can hear in the background a 200-foot waterfall right nearby, which is probably, I would guess, a rarity on Mars, even in times of high technology. Science and science fiction have done a kind of dance over the last century, particularly with respect to Mars. The scientists make a finding, it inspires science fiction writers to write about it, then a host of young people read the science fiction and are excited and inspired to become scientists to find out more about Mars, which they do, which then feeds again into another generation of science fiction and science. And that sequence has played a major role in our present ability to get to Mars. It certainly was an important factor in the life of Robert Goddard, the American rocketry pioneer, who I think more than anyone else paved the way for our actual ability to go to Mars. And it certainly played a role in my scientific development. I don't know why you're on Mars. Maybe you're there because we've recognized we have to carefully move small asteroids around to avert the possibility of one impacting the Earth with catastrophic consequences, and while we're up in near Earth space, it's only a hop, skip, and a jump to Mars. Or maybe we're on Mars because we recognize that if there are human communities on many worlds, the chances of us being rendered extinct by some catastrophe on one world is much less. Or maybe we're on Mars because of the magnificent science that could be done there. The gates of the wonder world are opening in our time. Or maybe we're on Mars because we have